we found that the two most vulnerable groups in most companies were sales and developers, interestingly enough. But what was surprising is they didn't click on the same types of fish, but they were both equally as likely to fall for something. What's your experience been? Have you noticed that certain departments are more likely to click on fish than maybe others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty common that, on the sales side of the house, that's a pretty new customers, new things coming down, right? So it's kind of like, what do we expect, right? Do we really not even like, it's not the obvious stuff they're clicking on, it's the less obvious stuff. And,
It is.
I can't always blame them when they get a very legit looking Microsoft notification that says you need to do X, Y, or Z. They're not technologists, right? They don't live in this day in and day out and I do. And why should I expect them to know, like, oh, this is slightly different than what I should expect, or and so I should definitely, be suspicious of this. And it's kind of, it's kind of unfair,
Yeah.
to a certain extent, right? So
Well, we drink our own Kool-Aid, obviously. So our customer success manager, she comes in and she says, "You're never going to get me." And then one day we have this fish that, how modern cars will tell you if you need an oil change or whatever. So we say, "Hey, you've got your check engine light on. You need to take it in for an instant service." And she clicks it, and was about to have her whole day ruined. But it does go to show that if you hit somebody at the right time with the right thing, there is that very likely scenario where they are gonna click in it. And like you said, it's not always the really common stuff. It can be that, that mundane everyday stuff. That's often sometimes where we let our guard down. The last pass master password change thing. Yeah, sure, it's going to freak me out, but I'm also more likely to notice that fish too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, the one I've always seen is the most common is it's the alert around the Christmas time, right? About, hey, your package is going to be late, or this has got delayed, or whatever else, right? They're not in the mindset of like, hey, someone's trying to get me. They're in the mindset of the holiday spirit, and now they're
Yeah,
worried that what they bought for somebody isn't going to arrive, right? And they go and they click on something, and I always go and talk to them. It's like, so you got an email from Amazon? They said, yeah. They said it, and it said your package was whatever. And I said, yeah. So I was really worried about it. I'm sorry, I didn't think about it. I said, do you have your Amazon account set up for your work email or for your personal? And I went, well, personal. I went, so why you click on, and they didn't click. And then they go, oh, yeah, right. But at that moment, that's not how their mind is thinking or working, right? They're in a
yeah.
busy day, they're doing whatever at work. This pops up, now they're concerned about something, they just jump on it, and they're not using. It's not a rational, like, thought process. But that's how these
Yeah.
people work, right? So
Well, and I think that's why we run the simulations in the first place, is because we need the user to actually go through that experience in order to, for lack of a better term, implant human virus definitions. When they've gone through the simulation, they've gone through that experience, that next time hopefully, it was us that caught them instead of the real bad guys in it. And I
right.
think it helps them to stop and think twice about what they're doing before they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Our job also is to make sure when we know these things are going to happen more often, right? Holiday times again, very common, is to communicate to them that, hey, just as a
Yeah.
reminder, like, be more careful than you normally are. Really think about this stuff before you click on it, right? And
Hmm.
one of the things I've done in the past also is provided them like with like one pagers or whatever you want to call it that kind of breaks it down to very simple steps. And I say, look, like, this isn't just for you here at work. Share with your friends, your family. Like, we want everyone to be safe over the holidays. Nobody wants to have their bank account hacked or things
Yeah.
stolen because they clicked on something they shouldn't have, you know. And so we want to make sure that is shared. And I think that's also the other way you get across to people is like when you show that this has an impact, not just the company, like you're not just protecting us, but you're actually protecting your family and your
Yeah.
friends as well. Then it starts to mean more, right?
Well, I agree. It's, tell your grandma that when she gets that text message that says her Timu shipment was canceled, to, that is not legit. Do not click on that link. Do not put those in. But I talk to people every day, and even those of us in this industry that are aware and educate our parents. Every last one of us gets calls from our parents on a regular basis. And they've had these issues where they fell for that Temu scam, or they have malware on their computer, and for whatever reason we can hear it telling them they have malware on their computer through the telephone. But I think it just goes to show that we have to do a better job as a society of educating, particularly the oldest of our society and the youngest of our society. I mean, we should be starting really young and embedding it to where when we're teaching people about their cell phones, we're talking about cybersecurity too, and privacy.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. We don't do that enough. We give someone this very powerful device with very little actual training and understanding of what it can actually do and the impact it can have in your life if you don't manage it properly, right? If when you're teaching someone how to drive, one of the things you go over is like safety, like, okay, this is why you buckle up, this is why you gotta be careful, and the damage can cause and things like that, right? But we don't do that for something that fits in the palm of our hand. And we definitely need to do more of that. But I think there's also the other aspect of it is I don't think we put enough pressure on the actual developers of those tools to protect us as well, right?
I
They're
agree.
so focused on the bottom line and earning more money that they're not protecting us. And there's definitely things they can do, like turning security on by default and other things to protect us that just isn't happening. So I think it has to come from both ways. We have a personal responsibility, but I think we need to expect more from the actual vendors as well.
Yeah, no, I had this incident with my own development team not too long ago, where I get this call from our security architect, and he's like, "Why on earth would you tell them that it's okay to do this?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I would never allow them to do this." And so I go to them and I'm like, "Why are you, pushing them to do this, saying that I told you to?" And they're like, "Well, you gave us this deadline. You said it had to get done by this date. This is how we're getting it done." And in that moment, I guess I became the part of the problem. But I think it does happen because we do. I mean, technology, any tech company, you have to move at the speed of tech. I mean, that was fast back in 2018, but it's just accelerated so much more than it ever was before in 2023, and even more so in 2024, with AI just really changing everything.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
so around AI, let's start by talking about the threat of it. Um, what parts of the AI threat do you find yourself most focused on?
I think the thing that I guess gets me the most concerned is kind of twofold. One is the ease of which these new attacks can be done, and now you're getting past the whole like the obvious flaws that would have been found in the attacks are now going away, right? The language barrier is gone, right? The
Yeah.
flow of the email is cleaner and better. Tools that would normally pick up on those things can't anymore because they can't tell the difference. Those things are like just that's to me is concerning because it means those phishing emails, those phishing attempts are now way better than they used to be. And then you put on top of that the speed at which they can craft them. So that spear phishing now becomes so much easier than it was before, right?
Yeah.
Before they would have to take so much time to like do some research, figure out what you want to do, craft this thing, send it off, hope it works, right? That could take a lot of time. Now it's so fast and so much easier for them to kind of send stuff out. And if something doesn't work, well, let's just iterate on it, almost like development, like just continually improving their process at a much faster clip,
Yeah.
which is super concerning for sure.
What and it literally flipped the advice that we give people upside down. It went from typos are a sign that it's malicious to
Right.
typos are a sign that it's a human. Uh, it's sort of like when we were kids, we were taught never get in the car with a stranger, and then Uber app is invented, and now that's all we do is we jump in cars with strangers.
Yep.
But that's how much AI has changed phishing, because it truly is now where the typos actually make it a little bit more credible, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
So are you
Yeah.
seeing many of those types of attacks, either targeting your clients or your organization specifically?
I mean, I'm definitely hearing about them more, right, than I was before, right? Everyone always heard
Yeah.
about phishing before, but these new ones, I think everyone's had stories of like events they've had or things they've seen. They were like, look, this one was pretty scary. Like we are like literally one click away from having, really dire consequences. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that concerns me the most is most of the time the prevention was like just someone kind of going, just had a
Mhm.
little gut feeling about something and they kind of paused or some little thing happened, right? It wasn't because there was some tool that identified it or some fancy gizmo that did something to prevent it. It was more or less like a gut kind of like this doesn't sit well, so I'm going to stop here and look, and then something occurs. And you hear the same thing from people who are doing deep fakes, you
Yeah.
know, the cloning the voices and all that stuff. The ones that
One of our
like don't work.
customers got hit by a deep fake the other day. Like, it's not just that crazy thing in the news anymore. It's
No,
happening to our customers now.
it is absolutely happening. I heard of one where, the person was on a call, they were doing this whole deal, and it was all going well. And the only reason he stopped it was because all of a sudden the person he was talking to, the green screen went away and he saw who he was really talking to. And then it popped back and he was like, whoa. And of course they killed the call and they did all the things they were supposed to do. But he said, why it like broke at that point and didn't work and all of a sudden it popped back on that's the only thing that saved them. Like, and it was just a malfunction in the technology. But those are going to happen less and less as this technology gets better and better, right? So those
Yeah.
things are just, those to me is that's what's kind of terrifying. This idea that someone can literally take like my image and likeness now, my voice, and
Hmm.
then use this to then go and do something.
Yeah, there's a red team framework now that makes it incredibly easy where, at least before it was fairly technical and fairly complicated to get these things working. But in typical hacker style, we're like, no, that's too difficult. Let me start an open source Git project so that we can make this easier to use these tools.
Yep.
Not sure what I
Yep.
think about that. That's my community though, so I shouldn't be
Yeah. Yeah.
surprised.
Yep.
But no, I definitely am seeing more and more of that. Now, you said something I found interesting earlier. You said that you're hearing from a lot more people that it was really close. It was one click, one person away from maybe it being successful. And I'm hearing a lot more of that too. And even inside of cybersecurity companies where, there's some really complex attacks that, yes, it gets to us. Yes, it doesn't go through. But by the time it makes it to your or my desk, we're like, holy crap, I'm surprised they didn't fall for that. And a lot of times when I'm seeing it, it is contextual. It tends to target our finance team, but it understands the organizational hierarchy, what my role is in the company, what their role is, and what type
Sure.
of even products would actually be bought. And they tend to do that sort of invoice fraud or fake invoice attack. That's the one that I've seen the most of that tends to be scaring people. Is
Yeah.
that what you're seeing? That's, that leads to some of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a lot of correlation there for sure. And you're right. They're definitely targeting specific departments and they can do it though because there's so much information on out there about the company and the structure
There
and
is.
who you work for and all that stuff is so readily available and that tied in with all the breaches that have happened on top of that. Like it's just easy for them to go and source all that information and use that then to create a really crafted, very targeted attack without again a lot of effort on their part,
Yeah.
which is the hardest part, right? We've made it so much easier on them because we've had so many breaches. It's like let me
Mhm.
just keep giving you information, right? And just make your life easier, hacker. You're gonna be just, oh, you didn't have enough yet. Let me give you a breach of LinkedIn. Oh, that wasn't enough. Well, let me give you a breach of this one as well, right? So
The breach I'm waiting on. Okay, so the second we start thinking about buying a product these days, they can read our brain, and we get ads about that. And I joke, they can't really read our minds. But I bring that up because I'm waiting on that database to get breached where it knows my interests. And I'll tell you, man, Facebook has some very targeted ads. Like they know that I'm the founder of a company. They know
Right.
what type of company. They know what types of projects I'm working on while I'm working on them. Like it's so, I mean, micro targeting.
Yep.
And they know my personal interests because that too they get right. And so what happens when these enterprise, I know that your team is the Ravens, let's say, and now I send you that timely fish at the right time, and it's pertinent to you and your interests. Like what
Yep.
happens then?
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely. I think it's not an if, it's a when, right? It's gonna. I mean,
I
I think
agree.
we've seen that, right? It's
Yeah.
at this point in time and the way things are transpiring, it's going to happen. The question is going to be what's going to be the impact, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and when are we, I think, in the U.S. going to really wake up and realize that our privacy laws are horrible, and
They
we're not
are.
protecting ourselves at all, and we're giving up all this information so easily for some free, whatever, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're going to give me something free here. You can have all my information. It's like, just
Here, you
just
can have me
thanks,
spy on me. I don't care. I just want
right?
it free.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
And I remember I just had that conversation with my son the other night. I was talking, I was like, look, when you're looking at these apps online for your phone and stuff, like you really got to think about what you're actually allowing this app to have access on your phone. Like what can it do? What does it say it can do? Like free isn't always better. Like free can
well,
be scary.
and nothing is free. You're
Right.
paying whether you pay with money or your privacy or your
Absolutely.
data, or your time. You're paying with something, and at the end of the day, you got to remember we're a very capitalistic society, which means nothing is free. They
Absolutely.
get something of value out of everything that they do, or they wouldn't do it.
Yep.
And I think that's a critical element that maybe people aren't as aware of as they should be. And I think so many people are like, well, we don't want to be paranoid, but it's not paranoia if it's just simply accepting the reality that they are, they have to get value there. Their shareholders, their investors don't give them money for nothing. You
Right.
have to have value out of everything.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. And you're right. It's even myself now, like I've always been a little cautious about being online and stuff like that anyways. But even now I'm kind of going to the point like, maybe I just need to go dark at this point. Do I just need to like kill all of it? And just I'm trying not to let that that paranoia seep in, but it's hard not to sometimes when you realize what's possible, what's capable when they have that level of information on you, right?
Yeah.
So
Meanwhile, I'm going the opposite direction as I literally live stream. So, but I had this interesting wake up call, or I don't know, experience. So I went up to Canada, to Toronto, and I met with, I went to the CBC, or Canadian Broadcast Company, their corporate headquarters, and I was on their version of 60 Minutes. And what was the name of the show? I forget the name of the show right now, but they were doing one specifically about SIM swapping,
Mhm.
and this attack that had happened to somebody. They lost a ton of cryptocurrency because they had their wallet stolen as a result of SIM swapping. And the SIM swapping attack happened as a result of the customer service chat being relatively insecure. Well, all of this, as a result of all of this, they want me to test the customer service chat, and to test the customer service numbers. And so ahead of time, they say, well, you can pretend to be these three people. And I start digging into them, and they're all Canadians, and I can't find anything on them. And I'm like, wait a second, this is so easy with the Americans. I mean, there's so much data out there. And I
Yeah.
go in barely knowing anything because their data privacy laws protected them as a people.
Yep.
Yet, in the US, that exact same thing. And I've got so much information. I know everything about you, and people really don't realize how much they give. They're like, well, I never posted my birth date online. Yes, you did. Your friends. I mean, if nothing else, you've got that old classmate from high school
Right.
that posted on your timeline publicly on Facebook that said, happy birthday,
Right.
that all turns into real valuable and tangible data that can be used against you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that. There was this viral video going around at one point about this guy who he would uh he would take a little clip of someone of an image someone sent him, and he
Yeah.
would then use that to then identify where they were in the world.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah,
The guy,
and
Jose or something.
yeah, it's absolutely amazing, but also again just creepy, right? You're kind of going, that is
Mhm.
insane that he can take that little bit of information and extrapolate that out into like, oh, let me take this bit. Oh, you have an accent. You live. I see this in your distance, and you have this going on. Like, and quickly too. Again, like
Yeah.
not a lot of effort really for him to do that. And it's just those kind of things. I think we just don't think about when we post photos and we post information on stuff and we do what we do. And not just us, but you're right. Even people who know us, who are we work,
Yeah.
our family members are doing it, our friends are doing it, right? So you can't even control what's happening half the time.
Well, and in the early days of Instagram, I mean, everyone was posting photos that were geotagged, and
Right.
and so you could typically use it to find somebody's exact home address,
Yep.
and even figure out sort of their routine and where they were going. And so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
privacy, I think, is not just something that needs to be legislated, but just the same as in high school and college, we're always talking about how we got to bring cybersecurity to people at a younger age. We've got to be talking privacy too, because I feel like that's the element that when we're talking about educating the youngins, we're forgetting about privacy. And I think that that's such an equally important
Yeah.
part, because I mean, ship sailed for us, but maybe this next generation can have some sort of chance of having some privacy.
No, you're absolutely. It's almost like we're doing proactive security for our kids, right? Which is we're trying to proactively protect them by informing them at an early age of how they need to protect themselves, right? And you're right. We got to
Yeah,
start
yeah,
young, right? We got to start young with like, look, this is what happened. This is what it means, and progressively go through that. And you're right. We teach them so much in these schools, but sometimes we miss some of the bigger pieces as well. Like, you know, how to keep yourself safe and secure online, and what that means when you don't, and what the ramifications can be. And it's not just about like, I know there's big things out there around suicide happening because people get bullied and stuff, and that's horrible. But it's also other things as well, right? That can happen. Your accounts can get hacked, your credit score can get jacked up. I mean, all sorts of things that can
yeah.
have long term effects as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, on the whole thing of bullying, I know when I was a kid, bullying was rampant. I was a nerd. I found out firsthand. I did a case study on it, if you will. But no, I mean, it took how many decades for them to actually get that training into schools and do something
Right.
about it. And it was a problem for over a decade after I was in school. It was a problem when
Sure.
my parents were in school. And so I think that often we're not keeping up. And when you've got something that's changing as fast as AI, if we can't keep up on the bullying front for education, how do our teachers stay up in front of things when it comes to like these more complex topics there?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's definitely something we need to do a better job of in all the schools, and
Yeah,
getting in front of it, and that kind of training them and prepping them for it, and trying not to do it in a way that's scary, right? I'm not trying to scare anybody or again make people paranoid. It's more about awareness. It's like just be
yeah,
aware, right? Of the choices you're making and the impacts they can have. And it's so hard, you know. I mean, I make bad choices now as an adult, right? I definitely made horrible choices as a kid because I couldn't think that far in the future,
yeah,
and we're asking them to basically do it. We're asking to say, look, think about this photo before you post it because it could have ramifications in your job 10 years from now. They're kind of going, what are
yeah.
you talking about? They can't comprehend that,
We've
right?
got some great examples though, with like, candidates for, president or vice president getting their public Zell, like their Zell history exposed because they forgot about privacy things. So,
Right.
at least in today's day and age, there's some pretty entertaining stuff on the news every day that you can point to and be like, don't be that person. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but okay, so you mentioned something else, and you talked about making it friendly, or I forget your exact words, but I always like to bring up the topic of carrot versus stick.
Hmm.
I feel like there's a very stick heavy mentality in this industry. And so I like to get everyone's opinion. What's your thought? Carrot or stick? I know it's not really that binary, but let's make it binary for today. Carrot or stick, and why?
For me, it's carrot. I think it has to
I
be.
like that.
Because the reality of it is you need the person you're trying to work with to want to work with you, right? It's just, it's like anything in life, right? If I have a dog, I'm trying to train it, and my way of training is every time it does something bad to whack it. Well, it's gonna learn, but it's also gonna just like flinch every time you come by, and it's not gonna want to be with you or hang out with you or anything else, right? And I think
Yeah.
employees aren't really that different, right? If you're constantly like whacking them over the head because they made a innocent mistake that any of us can make, as we've talked about, like they're never going to want do it proactively, right?
Yeah.
And they're never going to share with you when they see something or hear something. They're just going to avoid, avoid, avoid. They're going to be like, well, I don't want to bring that up because what if he yells at me, right?
Yeah.
So I think
And
it's
that means
really
that
important,
dog, who might also be on the sales team, could be scared of checking their email.
right? And it also could have even longer term effects in the sense of that you do it enough to the wrong employee and they become an insider threat. He says, well, fine. Like, you're going to always yell at me. You're always going to give me a hard time. Well, I know stuff you don't know, or I know how to get onto the system. You can't stop me. And I'm going to grab this information and post it or sell it or run or whatever. I'm going to ruin you. And that's a
Yeah,
lot of times how insider threats happen, right? It's usually it's a bad response by the company to an issue that causes that
it
to
is.
occur, right? So to me, like you're right, it's not binary, right? It can't be, but I'm always going to lean more towards the carrot than I am the stick because I think it's just a better approach. And how you get people on your team to then want to work with you and support you, and then be part of your, champion of the security program to help other people and bring it along.
So I agree. I think it's so critical that we lean toward the carrot over the stick, and it's taught to us since we're really young. Like, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. I don't know if your grandma ever told you that, or your mom, but mine certainly did. And it's true as we get older and move into these other domains. Now, you'd mentioned how it can create an insider threat where it makes people mad, but there's this other behavioral science principle that I've studied quite extensively, and I see it happen in heavily punitive environments constantly, and it's called learned helplessness. What happens is that you can take somebody who's really good at detecting something and convince them that they're really bad at detecting. And so if I trick them too many times without good education to follow up, this person that goes, man, I'm really good at detecting these threats, man, they're never going to get me,
Right.
all of a sudden is like, well, maybe I'm not. And when they accept that, they all of a sudden start clicking on more real fish in the real world too. And so
Right.
and we see it in our metrics as well. And so it's so critical that we keep things more positive, because we don't want our salespeople afraid to check their email. In fact, we don't want anyone afraid to be in their email.
Right.
The world runs in email. So I think that, so many people just try and like, oh, you can never click on anything. How am I going to reset a password? Like, let's
Right.
be realistic about this, because I've never seen a password reset link that I didn't have to click on.
Right. No,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And you said something there that's really important, which is it's about communicating them and explaining the why, right? So oftentimes we
mhm,
in security will tell people, don't do this. We tell them we don't ever get into the why they shouldn't do it. Like,
yeah,
I know sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it helps to sit down and have those overt conversations of like, hey, look, here's why this matters. Here's what can occur if we don't do this, that, or the other, right? Or
yeah,
here's how you reach out and verify something, or reach out to me if you have questions, or I'm available to assist you or whatever. Like, one of the things I always stress to my staff is I don't care if it's Christmas morning. If you see something looks weird and funky, I'd rather you call me and it be nothing than you don't, and I come in 8 hours later and find out, oh, we have a big problem, right?
yeah. They
Because they
just
were
bought
afraid to reach
500,000
out.
in gift cards or something.
Exactly, right? So I think we have to get to that point where they are willing to talk to us and willing to come to us and have those interactions and know that they're not going to get penalized, not going to, get, in trouble. and we will support them, right, and help
Yeah.
them through whatever's happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's important for them to realize that, there's so many threats outside of just what they're going to experience at work.
Yep.
And those threats don't care if they compromise them and steal their personal money or compromise them and steal the business money. They're very non-discriminatory in that way, but they always have the same goal, and it's to steal from you. And
Absolutely.
there's a lot of really large companies out there that are one of the issues that they're seeing amongst their employees are these romance scams hitting them.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's one of the many reasons. Listen, when you get that text message from the wrong number, that your phone doesn't help matters with, because the guest I had yesterday was reminding me and pointing out about how, particularly your iPhone, when you get a text, if there's a name in that text message, it'll just populate the name like the person. And
Right.
so the bad guys have figured this out, and they're using that. But there's so many people getting hit by these things, and they fall for it because they gave real models over there that will get on a video call with you. So just because
Yep.
you've talked to somebody or done a video call with somebody does not mean they're real.
No, absolutely, and you're right. It goes back to what we keep talking about, which is education, education, education. Like,
Yeah.
what is really happening? How does this really function and work? And how can you identify it or protect yourself from it, right? And it's just so important that we stay on top of those kind of ongoing updates to our staff, because I think what also happens is we see all the things that are coming down the pipe and all the changes and stuff, but I don't think we always keep up with keeping our staff informed what those changes are, right?
Yeah.
So we like get in front of them once a year for, oh, here's your security training for the year. But so much has happened in a year that's changed the whole landscape of security, right? And it really
Yeah.
means is we probably should be updating them monthly. Hey, just so
Hmm.
you know, this is what we're seeing this month. This is the latest scam. This is the new thing that's happening. This is what you need to be aware of, right? It's not about scaring them. It doesn't have to be some big, long, drawn out 45-minute thing. It could be a quick little like email. Like, hey,
Yeah.
here's the things we're seeing. Boom, boom, boom. Be aware of it, protect yourself, move on.
Well,
Kind of
and
thing.
users prefer brevity. They really do. I mean, too often, I think we get in the weeds with our users and we get really technical with them. And the users don't want technical. They want simple, and they want short, and they want light. I mean, they're used to TikTok, and they're used to Twitter, and they're used to Facebook, and all of it. Our world is micro now.
Right.
Except for our trucks. But I joke, but our whole world is on this sort of micro approach to everything, and as a result, people have very limited attention spans too. So it doesn't do us any
Absolutely.
good to get technical, because they don't care about the headers of that email. They will never care about the headers of that email.
Right. Yeah. And actually, that whole, and you're right, that whole attention span shrinking down is actually a benefit to the hacker, right? It makes their life
Hmm.
easier because, again, they're just having to get the hook. Once they get the hook, it,
Yep.
it just goes quickly from there. So it's all about them just getting that initial, like, just get them enough to so they'll click or they'll do whatever.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so hard, right? It's not like, you're right, no one's going to look at the headers except for maybe you and me, right? But otherwise, no one's really going to go to that level of detail. And so we have to, keep reminding staff of just that, right? Which is take the time to really understand what you're looking at. Take the extra 10 seconds. Like, it usually
Yeah.
doesn't take long, right? It's not like we're asking to take a full 5 minutes, like, to study this and analyze. Just give it a quick. And if you have questions, just ask your IT department, ask me, ask whoever. Like, is this real? Like, do I trust this? Is this okay? So,
And trust your gut. That is quite literally your subconscious's job, is to alert to threats,
absolutely.
and it can be tuned to alert to those things. So if you don't know why, but something feels off, that is your body's sort of subconscious telling you that something's off. In fact, I read this
Absolutely.
book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, or something like that. But or maybe it was regardless of the title, it talked about how we live in our conscious brain, and that's our slow brain. But the part of our brain that it acts as our subconscious, that makes sure we don't forget to breathe, that our heart doesn't stop beating, that's moving so much faster, it's insane. And
Right.
so if you were to just make it miles per hour, and you've got your slow brain going at 1 mile per hour, that fast brain's at 5,000 miles per hour. And I think users don't realize as much as maybe they need to, that gut response is their body's natural mechanism just adapting to evolving technologies.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think you're right. They don't pay attention to that enough, and they need to. They trust it.
Yeah,
It's there to try to help you, protect you for a reason, and it's not going to hurt to follow it, right?
yeah.
To give yourself a second to then verify it.
So I want to make sure we get time for just a couple more things here. Number one, over your years in cybersecurity, what are some of the top practices that you would recommend for anyone to make their awareness at really any part of their awareness, but their human element, more secure?
So I think it goes back to what I mentioned before, which is you have to know your users, right? And you have to be accessible to them, and you have to show that you're willing to work with them, hear them, partner from whatever, right? And that usually means that doesn't happen in a meeting, right? That doesn't happen in me doing a presentation or sending for training. That happens through me having conversations with them about anything
Yeah.
else in the world, right? Just human to human. Like, hey, how was your weekend? What are you doing? How's the family? Like, just having those kind of connections across the entire company, right? We all, too often, all of us, we get in our little area of like, well, I'm an IT guy, so I only talk to the IT people. When I'm marketing, so I only talk to marketing, right? And I think for us in security, we can't fall into that trap. We have to be part of all the groups, right? We have to interact with
Hmm.
all the groups. And I think that matters because then, when you have those connections and you send off messages or you ask people to report things or you do a presentation, they're more likely to want to listen, right? Likability, whether we like it or not, it matters, right? The more
And
likable we are, more willing to work with you.
and I would even add an element to that. It's not even just the likability, but I've almost never gone out where, or, let's say for drinks with somebody from a different department, where I didn't learn something that helped me better understand the company's risk.
Absolutely.
And I think that's another element, is because as security professionals, it's taken for granted that there's so much of the company dynamic that we're never getting exposed to, but we still have to protect it. And
Absolutely.
so building those bridges helps us to identify those threats in those questions that we need to be asking that we don't even know to ask yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. This is not in any, you're never going to read this in a security book. You're never going to go
Mhm.
to, the CISSP is not going to cover this at all, right? But this
Right.
idea that like having those relationships, and you're right, you get insights you wouldn't have gotten before. You're sitting down
Mhm.
having a beer with someone in a department, you're showing, and you're most always talking about work in some way, shape, or form, right? Usually someone's
Exactly.
complaining about something, right? Like, oh, we were
Yep.
dealing with this. And
100%.
then the stuff you pick up, you're like, wait, what are you guys doing again? Really? Why? And you just kind of, start to pull the thread a little bit, start getting more information. And it's really fascinating what you can learn that then you can then take, okay, well, we need to address that issue, right? We need to close that door, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
But if you
that's
do, like I
generally
said, it
when
really
those
helps.
calls happen at 7 o'clock at night after you've had one or two, and you're like, "Ooh, we got to fix this now."
Yeah, yeah. So, but definitely it's an aspect like it doesn't happen naturally. You have to you have to proactively do that kind of stuff. You have to proactively have those conversations and stuff and make those connections because they will pay dividends down the road more so than most security programs will.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's just another argument around diversity, is that we're hiring so many introverted types in this industry, and I mean, I love it because when I go to DEF CON, there's so many people just like me. But that's a concern too, that there's so many people just like me. And it's that diversity that helps us get into all these different departments, and brings those extroverts into a predominantly introverted field too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's funny. We hired someone recently, and he obviously, compared to most of the people on my team, is very extroverted.
Yeah.
And so within the first week, he's like out there talking to people, meeting people, and his manager's like, "This is great. I'm talking to people I've never talked to before because you're bringing them in, right?" So
Yeah.
you're right. Having different viewpoints in the world, having different cultures, having different personalities, all those things together really help to drive these things forward. They're so necessary, and we overlook that so much.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so before we wrap up, I like to end every podcast with pet peeves. And you've been in security long enough. You must have developed a pet peeve or two. So tell me, what are they? This is the juicy part.
um, so one of my pet peeves is I hate the assumption that if you're in security, that you will automatically be going to DEF CON or Black Hat or you are a hacker at some point, right? Um, I think that paints us into very much a corner that we're all, this personality type or this type of person, and we're not, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've never gone to any of those, and I'm still a CISO and I'm still good at my job, and those things don't really matter, right? You want to go enjoy them, have fun, right? But I think this expectation that that matters, I think is just kind of silly. We got to move past that.
I don't disagree. And honestly, they've gotten so large, and there's so many what I call tourists that go to them. It's great. Hey, you want to, play hacker for a weekend? That's cool. But you get a lot of people like that aren't in the industry, and so it's impossible to get into those rooms. And I know most of the people that have been going forever, they barely touch the conference anymore. They go there mostly to see their friends because it has gotten so crowded.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah, and to me, like I much prefer the local, smaller conferences that where, again, I make connections with people that I can then see on a regular basis who we can partner with and help each other out and be in our network and support each other. Right, those things matter to me more so than the big extravagant shows. That to me, like they're cool and they're fun. Don't be wrong. Like I'm not saying I wouldn't have a blast, right?
yeah.
But like long term, how much does that help me? Probably not a lot, right? The local ISSA chapter where I meet local CISOs who I can then have lunch with on a regular basis and help each other out or ask questions and feel like I have an actual connection. That is so much more worthwhile to me.
I prefer the smaller conferences too. I mean, as a vendor, not just personally, but as a CEO of a company, I'd rather go to a small conference and support that, where I can talk to people like yourself, and build real relationships. Than, well, I mean, I've sponsored RSA and Black Hat in the past, and what happens is, yes, they deliver a lot of traffic. But I talk to so many people, I don't remember anyone. And those people talk to so many vendors, they don't remember any of the vendors. And so
Absolutely.
I walk out with this nice big list of extremely cold leads. I'd much prefer a smaller list of warm leads, and understanding your problems so that I can, as opposed to just being a generic vendor, be like, hey, I know you told me you were trying to work on this, this, and this, and I think we can help you. And I imagine as a CISO, you'd prefer that type of vendor outreach anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one, I know my company tries really hard to do as well, which is to reach our customers where their challenges are, right? Like, let us help you. What is the challenge you're trying to address? Where can we help you solve your problems and help you become more secure and better and so forth? And I'm the same way, right? Those are the kind of conversations I want to have. Is I want to have partners who are there to help me, solve my challenges, right? And that's how
Exactly.
I think we need to go about it. And I think you're seeing a bit of a swing in the industry as a whole, hopefully moving away from the whole FUD approach, right, to a more embracing like we should be helping each other solve problems and addressing those challenges. And if I can't help solve your problem, here's a partner or someone who can, right? And
Yeah.
we take a more, pragmatic approach like that, as opposed to like, oh, if you don't use my tool, you're going to have a breach and then you'll be sorry. And it's like, just go away, right? That doesn't help me at all. It doesn't make me feel any better. And I'm certainly not going to buy your tool at all either. So I think that's definitely an approach we have to take across the board.
No, I worked for a company early in my career. I ran a red team, and we had this brilliant sales guy, but he was like too brilliant. He should have been on the team as a social engineer, I think, really. But he used fear really, really strongly. And this one pen test, he closed it, and they tell us to start the next day. And so we start the pen test. Well, first thing we do is compromise people's emails almost every single time. This one's like none other. And we get in there, and they're emailing back and forth about us, the pen testers, saying, hey, did we just screw up and hire real bad guys to hack us? And they were just terrified. And it showed me just how much that FUD can lead to all kinds of other things. And so I think, we got to sell based on merit. We will help you reduce your risk, not based on fear. Because I've actually never seen those fear or many of those fear sales pitches actually work either. If they have something in the valuable, they'll sell the value, not the fear.
Yeah. Yeah, and if they do work, it's a one and done, right? They're not coming back to you a second time. They're going to use you and move on when someone
Yeah.
comes along who actually wants to partner with them and help them, not just try to get a sale, right?
Yeah, and that client wasn't around any longer than that salesperson that closed them. And it didn't matter how much we did to try and rectify it. The damage was already done at the beginning. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well,